What makes a man believe he's untouchable? The fluorescent lights in mess hall Charlie buzzed like angry wasps. Camp Pendleton. Evening chow. The smell of industrial meatloaf mixed with cigarette smoke drifting in from outside. Metal trays clattered. Voices echoed off concrete walls. And everywhere, the particular swagger of men who believed they owned every inch of ground beneath their boots. She walked in alone. Auburn hair pulled back in a regulation ponytail. Green eyes that moved across the room like she was reading a map. Navy uniform with the patches removed. No visible rank. Nothing to identify her as anything other than, what? A contractor. A Pentagon observer. Someone who didn't belong. That's what they saw, a woman out of place, temporary. They had no idea what was about to happen. Marine Corporal Jake Thornton sat at the center table with his crew. Staff Sergeant Rex Donovan held court like always, shoulders squared, jaw set, eyes like granite. At 34, Donovan looked like a recruiting poster brought to life. His uniform pressed to perfection. Boots polished to mirrors. The kind of Marine who'd never met a problem he couldn't solve with superior firepower and unwavering conviction. Or so he told himself. Look closer, though, past the pressed uniform and practiced confidence. His hands trembled slightly when he thought nobody was watching. His eyes were bloodshot. There was something desperate in the way he commanded attention, like a man who knew his glory days were slipping away and couldn't bear to become irrelevant. Thornton sat to his right, 26 years old, built like a linebacker, hands the size of dinner plates. The unit's self-appointed enforcer. His knuckles bore the permanent discoloration of too many fights. His smile never reached his eyes. He'd washed out of Ranger School twice. Not because he lacked physical capability, but because he couldn't follow orders from anyone he didn't respect. That failure had turned into resentment. Hard, cold, permanent. Across from him sat Lance Corporal Danny Cruz, 23 and hungry. Lean where Thornton was thick, quick where the others were methodical, the communications specialist, smart enough to have earned a full scholarship to MIT, which he'd turned down to enlist. He needed to prove himself where it really mattered. And Private First Class Mike Sullivan, the youngest at 24, fresh from advanced infantry training with scores high enough to write his own ticket. He'd requested Bravo Company specifically because of their reputation. Even sitting, he stood at attention, back ramrod straight, eyes scanning constantly for approval. In his mind, earning their respect was the key to everything. The mess hall operated on rules as rigid as any regulation. Officers sat separately from enlisted. Senior NCOs commanded the prime tables near the windows. Junior Marines filled in the gaps. And women, the few stationed at Oceanside, kept to their own corner, a safety measure born from bitter experience. Tonight felt different. Word had been circulating, changes were coming, budget cuts, personnel transfers, unit reorganizations that could scatter Donovan's carefully built kingdom to the four winds. The tension was thick. Everyone was looking for someone to blame. She moved through the serving line with quiet efficiency. Food as fuel, not pleasure. She found an empty table in the corner, sat down alone, started eating. Completely unaware of the attention she was drawing. Or was she? Donovan noticed her first. His eyes narrowed. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching her with predatory focus. "Well, well," he said, voice carrying just far enough. "Looks like we've got ourselves a lost little lamb." Thornton followed his sergeant's gaze, grinned. "Pentagon sent us a babysitter, Sarge. Someone to make sure we're playing nice with our toys." The woman didn't look up, just kept eating, methodical, calm. Cruz leaned forward, voice dropping. $20 says she's some admiral's daughter getting the grand tour before daddy retires. 50 says she's a social worker, Sullivan added, his young face flushed. Here to counsel us about our feelings. Laughter rippled through their table, the kind that invited others to join in. Soon half the mess hall was watching, waiting. Donovan stood, slow, deliberate. The room went quiet. "Think I'll go welcome our guest properly," he said. He walked toward her table, boots heavy on the floor, each step a statement. Thornton and Cruz followed. Sullivan hesitated, then joined them. Safety in numbers, pack mentality. They surrounded her table. She looked up, met Donovan's eyes, didn't speak. "You lost, ma'am?" Donovan asked. The word ma'am dripped with mockery. "No," she said, simple, direct. "This is a Marine mess hall, you Navy." "Yes." "You got business here." "Eating dinner." Silence. Thornton shifted his weight. Cruz crossed his arms. The woman went back to her meal. Donovan's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being dismissed. "What's your name?" She chewed, swallowed, looked up again. "Does it matter?" "I asked you a question." "And I asked you one." The mess hall held its breath. Nobody talked to Staff Sergeant Donovan like that. Nobody. "Listen, sweetheart," Thornton said, stepping closer. "The sergeant asked you nice. Show some respect." She set down her fork, stood. She was maybe 5'7", athletic build visible even under the loose utility uniform. She looked at Thornton, then at Donovan. "Respect isn't demanded," she said quietly. "It's earned." That's when it happened. Thornton reached out, grabbed her ponytail, yanked her head back. Not hard enough to hurt, just enough to humiliate, to remind her who was in charge. "That's how we earn respect around here," he said. The room erupted, whistles, laughter, approval. But she didn't flinch. She looked at Thornton, really looked at him, and something in her eyes made him uncomfortable, made him let go. "You just assaulted a superior officer," she said, voice still quiet, still calm. More laughter. "Superior officer, this woman." Donovan smirked. "You want to file a complaint, feel free, but around here we handle things Marine Corps style." "I'm not a Marine," she said. "Clearly." She picked up her tray, walked to the dish, return. The crowd parted for her, some still laughing, some watching with curiosity now. She reached the exit, turned back. "My name," she said, "is Commander Sarah Mitchell, SEAL Team 7. I'll be conducting integration training with Bravo Company starting tomorrow at 0600. I suggest you get some sleep. You're going to need it." She left. The mess hall went silent. Someone dropped a tray. The clatter echoed like a gunshot. Thornton's face had gone pale. Cruz looked like he might be sick. Sullivan stood frozen, mouth open. Donovan stared at the empty doorway. His hands weren't trembling anymore. They were shaking. Because he knew, they all knew. Commander, SEAL Team 7. That wasn't just any Navy officer. That was one of the deadliest operators in the United States military. And Thornton had just grabbed her by the hair in front of witnesses. The arrogance drained from the room like water from a broken tank. Someone whispered, "We're so screwed." They had no idea how right they were. Why does the worst news always come when you're least prepared? Thornton couldn't sleep. He lay in his rack, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. The feel of her hair in his hand, the look in her eyes, the absolute calm in her voice when she identified herself. Commander Sarah Mitchell, SEAL Team 7. He'd assaulted a SEAL commander in front of 40 witnesses, on base. His military career was over. Maybe his freedom too. Assault on a superior officer. Article 15 at minimum. Court-martial more likely. Dishonorable discharge. Prison time. His life was finished because of 5 seconds of stupidity. At 0400 he gave up on sleep, got up, dressed, walked through the pre-dawn darkness toward the training yard. Maybe if he got there early, maybe if he apologized, maybe. But he knew better. This wasn't the kind of thing you apologized away. The training yard was empty, or so he thought. Then he saw her, running the obstacle course, alone, in full combat gear. He watched from the shadows. She moved like water, fluid, efficient, no wasted motion, over the wall, under the wire, through the tires, her breathing steady, controlled. She finished the course, checked her time, started again. Thornton had run that course hundreds of times. His personal best was 6 minutes 43 seconds. She just finished in 5:52, in full gear. He stepped out of the shadows. "Commander." She stopped, turned, looked at him. No anger, no contempt, just assessment. "Corporal Thornton." He didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry," felt pathetic, inadequate. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." "Guilty conscience." "Yes, ma'am." She walked toward him, stopped a few feet away. In the dim light before dawn, she looked different, not like the woman in the mess hall, harder, more dangerous. "Do you know why I'm here?" she asked. "Integration training." "Do you know what that means?" He shook his head. "It means teaching Marines like you how to work with Special Operations Forces. It means breaking down the walls between conventional and unconventional warfare. It means transforming good soldiers into exceptional ones." She paused. "But I can't do that if you spend the next 3 months in the brig." Thornton's heart hammered. "Ma'am, what you did last night was assault, clear, witnessed, career-ending." She let that sink in. "But I'm not going to report it." He couldn't breathe. "You want to know why?" "Yes, ma'am." "Because punishment isn't always justice, and justice isn't always growth." She looked at him, really looked at him. "You made a mistake based on assumptions, about me, about yourself, about what strength looks like. I could destroy your career and you'd learn nothing except to hide your prejudice better." The words hit like body blows. "Or," she continued, "you could spend the next 3 months learning why those assumptions were wrong. You could become better than the man who grabbed my hair. You could help me turn Bravo Company into something extraordinary." "Why would you do that?" His voice cracked. "Because I've seen your service record, Corporal. 2 deployments, 3 commendations. Ranger School washout, not because you weren't capable but because you couldn't follow orders from people you didn't respect." She stepped closer. "That's not a character flaw, that's a growth opportunity, if you're willing to take it." Silence. The sun was starting to rise, pink and gold on the horizon. "I don't deserve this," Thornton said. "No, you don't, but deserve has nothing to do with it." She turned back toward the obstacle course. "Training starts in 90 minutes, don't be late." She started running again. Thornton stood there watching her disappear into the morning light. He felt something unfamiliar. Shame, yes, but also something else. Something that felt almost like hope. He walked back to the barracks, found Donovan already awake, Cruz and Sullivan too, all of them looking like they'd seen ghosts. "She's not reporting it," Thornton said. Relief flooded their faces. "But we're doing the training," he continued. "All of it. And we're going to learn what we did wrong, what we've been doing wrong." Donovan frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about becoming better Marines, better men, or we can keep being the guys who grab women by the hair and call it strength." Sullivan looked at the floor. Cruz shifted uncomfortably. Donovan's face hardened. "You giving orders now, Corporal?" "No, Sarge, I'm making a choice. You can make yours." At 0600, Bravo Company assembled on the training yard. 37 Marines, combat veterans, hard men, arrogant men. Commander Sarah Mitchell stood before them in full combat gear. Next to her was a Marine colonel, Harrison, the base commander. Harrison didn't smile. "Listen up," he said. "Commander Mitchell has been assigned to conduct integration training with this unit. That training is mandatory. Your performance will be evaluated. Your futures depend on it." He paused. "Some of you may think this is a joke, that a Navy officer has nothing to teach Marines. I encourage you to hold onto that belief. It'll make what happens next more educational." He stepped aside. Mitchell stepped forward. "Good morning," she said. Her voice carried across the yard without shouting. "For the next 12 weeks, you belong to me. We're going to push past every assumption you have about warfare, about yourselves, about what's possible." She looked at each of them. "Some of you will hate me. Some of you will quit. Some of you will become the best versions of yourselves you've ever been." The morning sun broke over the horizon. "The choice," she said, "is yours." What she didn't tell them was what came next, the physical trials that would break them down, the tactical scenarios that would expose every weakness, the psychological evaluations that would strip away their armor. She didn't tell them because they wouldn't have believed it anyway. They were about to discover that everything they thought they knew was wrong. How do you break a man who's built his entire identity on being unbreakable? Day 1 started simple, a 12-mile ruck march in full combat gear, standard Marine training. Easy. Except Mitchell set a pace that had them gasping within the first mile. She led from the front. No breaks, no slowing down. By mile 6, men were falling behind. By mile 9, Sullivan was vomiting. By mile 12, only 8 Marines finished within the time standard. Mitchell wasn't even breathing hard. "Tomorrow we'll work on your cardiovascular conditioning," she said. Day 2 was combat drills, hand-to-hand, weapons manipulation, room clearing. Mitchell demonstrated techniques they'd never seen, moves that violated everything they'd been taught about fighting fair. "Combat isn't fair," she said, dropping Cruz to the ground for the 3rd time. "Combat is survival. The enemy doesn't care about your ego." Cruz got up, got dropped again, got up, got dropped again. On the 5th time, he stopped getting up. Not because he was hurt, because he was learning. Day 3 was tactical analysis. They watched footage of real combat operations. Mitchell froze frames, pointed out mistakes, explained alternative approaches. Donovan recognized one of the operations. His unit, Afghanistan, they'd called it a success. 3 enemy combatants neutralized. Mission accomplished. Mitchell showed them the full picture, the civilian casualties they'd missed, the intelligence opportunities they'd destroyed, the long-term strategic damage they'd caused. "You won that battle," she said, "but you lost the war because you didn't understand what you were fighting for." Donovan sat silent, face red. Day 4 was communications training, Cruz's specialty. He thought he'd finally found solid ground. He was wrong. Mitchell put them in scenarios with degraded communications, equipment failures, enemy jamming, hostile environments. Cruz's standard protocols failed within minutes. "Your technology is a tool," Mitchell said, "not a crutch. When it fails, what do you have left?" Cruz had no answer. By day 7, the unit was fractured. Half wanted to quit, half wanted to prove her wrong. All of them were exhausted. That's when Mitchell changed tactics. Day 8, she took them to the range. Live fire exercises, moving targets, time pressure, stress scenarios. She shot perfect scores, every time, every drill. Then she handed her weapon to Sullivan. "Your turn," she said. He shot terribly, nerves, pressure, the weight of her expectations. "Again," she said. He shot worse. Again. Worse still. On the 4th attempt, he threw down the weapon. "I can't do it." "You're right," she said. "You can't. Not while you're shooting for my approval instead of the target." She picked up the weapon, handed it back. "Forget I'm here, forget the score. Forget everything except the sight picture and the trigger press. That's all that exists, you and the target." Sullivan tried again, hit 7 out of 10. "Better," Mitchell said, "again." 8 out of 10. Again. 9 out of 10. By the end of the day, Sullivan was shooting scores he'd never hit before, not because the weapon changed, because his mind did. Day 10 was land navigation. Mitchell split them into teams, gave them coordinates, told them the first team back won early liberty. They rushed off, competitive, aggressive. All except Thornton's team. They took their time, studied the map, planned the route, moved methodically. They finished last, but they were the only team that found all the checkpoints. The other teams had cut corners, missed objectives, prioritized speed over accuracy. Mitchell gathered them all. In combat, finishing first means nothing if you missed your target. The mission isn't about being fastest. It's about being right. She looked at Thornton's team. Good work. Thornton felt something strange, pride, not in dominating others, in doing the job correctly. Day 15. Urban warfare scenarios, building clearance, hostage rescue, close quarters combat. Mitchell put them through scenarios that seemed impossible. Outnumbered, outgunned, time pressure, civilian casualties to avoid. They failed over and over. But each failure came with a debrief. What went wrong, what could improve, what to try next. Crews noticed something. Mitchell never called them stupid, never mocked their failures. She treated each mistake as data, information to process and learn from. It was the opposite of how they'd been trained, where failure meant shame, where mistakes were weaknesses to hide. Here, failure was just another step toward success. Day 21, 3 weeks in, Mitchell called them together for a tactical discussion. "You've been thinking like Marines," she said. "Overwhelming force, superior firepower, direct assault." She pulled up a mission scenario. Enemy compound, high-value target, standard Marine approach would be full assault. "What if I told you there's a way to complete this mission without firing a shot?" They looked at her like she was insane. She walked them through it. Intelligence gathering, pattern analysis, exploiting enemy routines, creating opportunities, precision over power. It violated everything they'd been taught. Marines didn't sneak, they didn't wait, they attacked. But as Mitchell laid out the plan, something clicked. Donovan saw it first. "You're using their strength against them," he said slowly. "Exactly. The strongest enemy has the biggest blind spots. You just have to find them." Day 28, 4 weeks, halfway through the training. Mitchell assembled them in the conference room, put up photos on the screen. Her SEAL team, missions they'd completed, operations nobody had heard about. "This is my team," she said. 11 operators, 3 women, 8 men, all of them among the deadliest people on Earth. She clicked to the next slide. Statistics, success rates, casualty ratios, mission completion percentages. The numbers were staggering. "You want to know our secret?" she asked. They leaned forward. "We don't care who's strongest, we care who's smartest. We don't care who can run fastest. We care who can think fastest. We don't measure success by who we killed. We measure it by who we saved." She turned off the screen. "Every one of you is capable of becoming that kind of operator. But first, you have to stop being who you were and become who you could be." Silence. Then Sullivan raised his hand. "How do we do that?" Mitchell smiled, first time they'd seen it. "By admitting you don't know everything. By asking questions instead of pretending to have answers. By valuing competence over ego." She looked at Thornton. "By learning that strength isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself." That night in the barracks, something shifted. Donovan gathered his men, looked at faces he'd known for years, saw them differently now. "We've been doing this wrong," he said quietly. Nobody argued. "We thought being elite meant being better than everyone else, but we were just better at lying to ourselves." Cruz nodded. Sullivan looked at the floor. Thornton met Donovan's eyes. "So what do we do?" Thornton asked. "We start over," Donovan said. "We learn for real this time." The next morning, day 29, they showed up different, not in appearance, in attitude. They asked questions. They admitted confusion. They helped each other instead of competing. Mitchell noticed, said nothing, just pushed them harder. Because she knew, real change didn't come from one moment. It came from 1,000 small choices to be better than yesterday. And these Marines were finally making those choices. Can you measure the exact moment someone becomes who they were always meant to be? Week 7, Mitchell introduced them to her SEAL team. 11 operators, some of the most dangerous people on the planet. They arrived without fanfare. No showboating, no ego displays, just quiet professionals doing their job. The Marines expected hostility, rivalry, the usual inter-service tension. Instead, they got respect. Petty Officer Martinez, a female sniper with 73 confirmed kills, shook hands with Sullivan. "Commander Mitchell says you've got potential. Let me show you some things about long-range shooting." She spent 3 hours with him, adjusting his breathing, teaching him to read wind, explaining how to account for factors he'd never considered. Sullivan's shooting improved 30% in one afternoon. Lieutenant Commander Rhodes, the team's intelligence specialist, sat with Cruz. Communications isn't just about technology. It's about understanding human behavior. Let me show you something. He taught Cruz how to read enemy communication patterns, how to predict responses, how to exploit psychological vulnerabilities in enemy networks. Cruz's mind exploded with possibilities he'd never imagined. The SEAL team didn't treat the Marines as inferiors. They treated them as colleagues, professionals who happened to have different specializations. It was humbling and inspiring. On day 43, Mitchell ran a joint exercise, SEALs and Marines working together, a complex scenario requiring both conventional and unconventional tactics. The mission was a nightmare: hostage rescue in an urban environment, multiple buildings, unknown number of hostiles, civilians in the mix, time pressure. The Marines' first instinct was to assault, overwhelming force. The SEALs suggested patience, intelligence gathering, surgical precision. For 2 hours they planned, Marines contributing conventional tactics knowledge, SEALs adding special operations expertise. The resulting plan was brilliant, a combination of approaches neither group would have developed alone. The exercise went flawlessly, not a single casualty, all hostages rescued, all objectives met. Afterward, Martinez pulled Donovan aside. "You've got good people," she said. "They just needed to learn how to think differently." "Commander Mitchell taught us that," Donovan replied. "No, she just gave you permission to learn. You did the work." That night, Mitchell gathered Bravo Company alone. "8 weeks down," she said. "4 to go. You've come further than I expected, farther than you probably realize." She pulled up training metrics on the screen: physical scores, tactical evaluations, team cohesion measurements. Every metric had improved, some dramatically. "But numbers don't tell the whole story," Mitchell continued. "The real question is, who have you become?" She looked at each of them. "Corporal Thornton, when you started, you measured your worth by your ability to dominate others. What do you measure it by now?" Thornton thought carefully. "By my ability to complete the mission, regardless of who gets credit." "Lance Corporal Cruz, you came here desperate for approval. What do you seek now?" "Competence," Cruz said. "Real skill, not validation." "Private First Class Sullivan, you wanted to belong, do you?" Sullivan smiled. "Yes, ma'am, but not because they accept me, because I accept myself." "Staff Sergeant Donovan, you built your identity on being the alpha, the dominant force. What are you now?" Donovan was quiet for a long moment. "A student," he finally said. "Still learning, probably always will be." Mitchell nodded. "Good, because the moment you think you know everything is the moment you stop growing." Week 9 brought advanced combat scenarios. Mitchell threw everything at them: equipment failures, leadership casualties, communication breakdowns, impossible odds. They adapted, overcame, succeeded. Not because they were stronger, because they were smarter. Week 10 was psychological warfare training, understanding enemy tactics, resisting interrogation, maintaining mental resilience under pressure. Mitchell brought in specialists, people who'd survived POW situations, people who'd endured unimaginable stress. The lesson wasn't about toughness. It was about flexibility, mental agility, the ability to adapt to circumstances beyond your control. Thornton broke during one exercise, completely broke down, tears, shaking, the works. Afterward he expected shame, mockery. Instead, Mitchell sat with him. "You know what I just saw?" she asked. "Weakness," he said bitterly. "I saw courage. It takes more strength to break and admit it than to pretend you're fine. You just learned something about yourself that most people spend their entire lives avoiding." Week 11. Colonel Harrison returned to observe. He watched the Marines run exercises, saw them operate with the SEAL team, witnessed the transformation. After, he pulled Mitchell aside. "I didn't think you could do it," he admitted. "I thought they were too far gone, too set in their ways." "They weren't gone," Mitchell said, "just lost. They needed someone to show them a different path. You did more than that. You gave them back their dignity, the real kind, not the false pride they were wearing like armor." Harrison paused. "General Kine wants to expand this program, take it to other units, use what you've done here as a model." Mitchell shook her head. "It's not a model you can replicate. Every unit is different. What worked here might not work somewhere else." "Then what's the lesson?" "That people can change. If you give them a reason to. If you show them what's possible instead of just telling them what's wrong." Week 12, the final week. Mitchell designed one last exercise, the hardest yet, a 72-hour field operation combining everything they'd learned. Physical endurance, tactical planning, technical skills, psychological resilience, team cohesion. She didn't tell them, but this was the test. Pass or fail, everything came down to this. They deployed into the field. 3 days, no support, just the mission and each other. The first 24 hours went smoothly, too smoothly. Then Mitchell introduced chaos, simulated enemy contact, equipment failures, casualty scenarios. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Old habits would have meant panic, aggression, falling apart. Instead, they adapted. When Donovan went down with a simulated injury, crews took command without hesitation. When communications failed, they used backup protocols crews had developed. When they were outnumbered, they used terrain and tactics instead of force. They completed the mission, not perfectly, but successfully. When they returned, exhausted and filthy, Mitchell was waiting. "Congratulations," she said, "you passed." Sullivan collapsed, crews laughed with relief, Thornton just smiled. Donovan walked up to Mitchell, stood at attention. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." "Granted." "Thank you for not giving up on us, for seeing what we could become instead of just what we were." Mitchell looked at these Marines, men who'd walked into her training program as arrogant, broken, dangerous, and walked out as something better. "I didn't make you change," she said. "I just showed you the door, you walked through it." The final day of training, Mitchell stood before Bravo Company one last time. "You came here thinking you were elite, the best, untouchable," she paused. "You were wrong, you were good, but you weren't great." Nobody argued. "Now, you're something different, not because you're stronger or faster or tougher, but because you understand what those things actually mean." She looked at Thornton. "Strength isn't dominating others, it's controlling yourself." At Cruz, "Intelligence isn't knowing everything, it's knowing how to learn." At Sullivan, "Belonging isn't about proving your worth, it's about finding people who see your value." At Donovan, leadership isn't about being alpha, it's about making others better. She stepped back. You're not my students anymore. You're my colleagues, my equals, my brothers in arms. She saluted them. They saluted back. For the first time in 12 weeks, tears ran down faces, not from weakness, from pride, the real kind. That night Thornton found Mitchell alone, packing her gear. Commander, Corporal, I need to say something about that first night, in the mess hall. You don't have to. I do. I grabbed you because I thought you were weak, because I thought being a woman made you less, because my entire identity was built on being superior to people I decided weren't worth my respect. He paused. I was wrong about everything, and I'm sorry. Mitchell looked at him, really looked at him. You know what I saw when you grabbed my hair? An asshole. She smiled. I saw a man who was so terrified of being irrelevant that he'd attack anyone who threatened his sense of importance. I saw someone who needed help, and I'm glad I could give it. You saved my career, probably my life. No, you saved yourself. I just gave you the tools. Thornton nodded, started to leave, stopped. For what it's worth, you're the best officer I've ever served under. And I'm not saying that because you're a SEAL or because you beat us in every drill. I'm saying it because you made me want to be better. That's real leadership. Mitchell watched him go, thought about the man who'd grabbed her hair 12 weeks ago, the anger, the arrogance, the fear. That man was gone. In his place was someone worth serving alongside. What happens when transformation becomes permanent? 6 months after the training ended, Bravo Company deployed to a joint operation in Southeast Asia. Intelligence gathering, humanitarian assistance, working alongside SEAL teams in a complex environment requiring both conventional and special operations expertise. The old Bravo Company would have clashed with the SEALs, territorial disputes, ego battles, mission failure. The new Bravo Company operated seamlessly. Donovan coordinated with SEAL commanders like they'd worked together for years. Cruz's communication protocols integrated perfectly with special operations requirements. Sullivan's navigation skills got them through terrain that would have stopped conventional forces. And Thornton had become the bridge, the translator between two military cultures, someone who understood both perspectives and could help others do the same. The mission was a success, not just in achieving objectives, in proving that change was real, lasting, permanent. Colonel Harrison included Bravo Company's performance in his report to General Kine. The report noted something remarkable. The unit that had been scheduled for disciplinary action was now being recommended as a training model for inter-service cooperation. Back at Camp Pendleton, the story of what happened in that mess hall had become legend. Not the original incident, the transformation that followed. New Marines arriving at the base asked about it. Is it true? Did a SEAL commander really train with Bravo Company? Did they really change? The answer was always the same. Yes, and if you're willing to learn, you can too. The training protocols Mitchell developed were adopted at other bases. Quantico, Lejeune, Pendleton, not as rigid doctrine but as flexible frameworks for breaking down barriers between military branches. More importantly, the psychological principles were integrated into leadership development, teaching officers that real strength came from self-mastery, not domination. That intelligence meant adaptability, not knowing everything. That belonging came from contribution, not conformity. Thornton was promoted to sergeant, not because of time in service, but because of demonstrated leadership. His ability to help other Marines navigate their own transformations made him invaluable. Cruz was selected for advanced communications training with naval special warfare. His hybrid understanding of conventional and special operations made him uniquely qualified. Sullivan became a team leader, specializing in integrating new Marines into the unit culture. His own journey from desperate validation seeker to confident professional made him perfect for helping others through similar transitions. And Donovan was offered a position at the Staff NCO Academy, teaching leadership development to senior Marines. He almost turned it down, almost said he wasn't qualified. Then he remembered something Mitchell had told him. The best teachers are those who remember what it was like to learn. He accepted. 1 year after the training ended, Bravo Company received a package, no return address. Inside was a photograph. Commander Mitchell standing with her SEAL team, all of them in combat gear, somewhere overseas, somewhere dangerous. On the back, a note in Mitchell's handwriting. Still learning, still growing, still becoming, hope you are too. Donovan pinned the photo in the unit's common area. Next to it, he added something else, a plaque with words he'd written himself. Strength is not dominating others, it is mastering yourself. Intelligence is not knowing everything, it is knowing how to learn. Belonging is not proving your worth, it is finding your value. Leadership is not being alpha, it is making others better. Below that, one more line. Bravo Company, changed by Commander Sarah Mitchell, transformed by ourselves. 2 years later, Thornton ran into Martinez at a joint training exercise in Virginia, the SEAL sniper who'd spent hours teaching Sullivan to shoot. "How's your unit?" she asked. "Still growing," Thornton said. "Still trying to live up to what Commander Mitchell showed us." "You know what she said about you?" "No. She said you were the hardest and the easiest. Hardest because you were so locked into your old identity. Easiest because once you broke completely. No half measures. You went all in on becoming better." Thornton smiled. She saw something in us we couldn't see in ourselves. That's what great leaders do. They don't make you who they want you to be. They help you become who you already were. You just didn't know it yet. 3 years after that mess hall incident, General Kine requested a meeting with the Marines who completed Mitchell's training. All of them. Donovan, Thornton, Cruz, Sullivan, every member of the original Bravo Company. They assembled in a conference room at the Pentagon, nervous, uncertain what this was about. Kine entered, looked at them. "Gentlemen, I want to tell you about a mission. Classified. High stakes. Requiring both conventional forces and special operations expertise. The kind of thing that usually fails because different military branches can't work together." He pulled up a presentation. 3 months ago, we conducted this operation. SEAL teams and Marine units working in coordination. 0 casualties. Perfect execution. Mission success. He clicked to the next slide. Photos of the operation. The SEAL team leader was Commander Sarah Mitchell. The Marine commander was Captain Rex Donovan, formerly Staff Sergeant Donovan, Bravo Company. Donovan's eyes widened. The integration protocols you developed during that training, they're now standard procedure for joint operations. The psychological principles you learned, they're being taught at every leadership school in the military. Kine paused. You started as a case study in what not to do. You became a model for what's possible when people are willing to change. After the meeting, as they walked through the Pentagon corridors, Sullivan spoke up. "Do you ever think about that night, in the mess hall?" "Every day," Thornton said quietly. "What do you think?" "I think about who I was, and I'm grateful I'm not him anymore." "Do you think she planned it, the whole thing?" Donovan shook his head. "I think she saw an opportunity, a chance to teach us something we couldn't learn any other way, and she took it." "By not destroying us when she could have," Cruz added. "Exactly. She gave us something more valuable than punishment. She gave us possibility." That evening, Donovan sat alone in his hotel room, thought about everything that had changed, everything he'd learned. He remembered the man he'd been, arrogant, desperate, terrified of irrelevance, building his identity on being superior to others. That man was a stranger now. He pulled out his phone, typed a message to a number he'd kept but never used. "Commander Mitchell, this is Rex Donovan. I just wanted to say thank you for seeing what we could become, for believing it was worth the effort. You changed my life. You changed all our lives. I hope wherever you are, you know the impact you had, not just on us but on everyone we've taught since. The ripples keep spreading, still learning, still growing, still becoming, semper fi." He hit send. 3 minutes later, his phone buzzed. "Donovan, the man I met grabbed women by the hair to prove his dominance. The man who sent this message understands that real strength is measured in lives improved, not enemies defeated. You didn't change because of me. You changed because you chose to. That choice is the only thing that ever mattered. Keep growing, keep teaching, keep spreading those ripples. And remember, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. SM." Donovan read it 3 times, smiled, saved it. Because some lessons were worth keeping forever. The mess hall at Camp Pendleton still buzzes with fluorescent lights. Marines still gather over industrial meatloaf. The smell of cigarette smoke still drifts in from outside. But something has changed. Women eating alone aren't dismissed. Different ranks mix more freely. Respect is earned through competence, not intimidation. The story of Commander Sarah Mitchell is told to every new Marine who arrives, not as a cautionary tale, as an inspiration. "What happened?" they ask. "A woman walked into a mess hall. Marines thought she was weak. They were wrong." "Then what?" "Then she taught them what strength really means." The plaque in Bravo Company's common area has been copied. Variations of it hang in training facilities across the military. The words change slightly. The message remains the same. Real strength is internal. Real intelligence is adaptive. Real belonging is earned. Real leadership is transformative. Thornton retired after 20 years, became a counselor for veterans struggling with PTSD and transition. He uses lessons Mitchell taught him, about breaking completely to rebuild stronger, about admitting weakness as the first step to real strength. Cruz joined the intelligence community, works in a classified role nobody can talk about, but his colleagues say he has an unusual gift, the ability to see connections others miss, to integrate different perspectives into unified strategy. Sullivan stayed in the Marines, currently a master sergeant, training officer specializing in leadership development. His sessions are legendary. Marines come out different than they went in. Donovan teaches at the Staff NCO Academy. His class on transformational leadership has a waiting list because he doesn't teach from theory. He teaches from experience, from failure, from redemption. They stay in touch, monthly calls, annual reunions, not because regulation requires it, because some bonds transcend duty. And Mitchell, she's still out there, still operating, still teaching, still showing people what they could become if they're willing to try. Sometimes her former students see news reports, a successful mission, a hostage rescue, a strategic operation. They recognize her fingerprints in the planning, the blend of patience and precision, the focus on saving lives, not taking them. They smile because they know. That's her. Still changing the world, one operation, one student, one transformation at a time. The mess hall incident was a moment. What followed was a movement. Not announced with fanfare, not mandated by regulation, just people choosing to be better, choosing to grow, choosing to see strength as something other than domination. Years from now, historians might write about the evolution of military culture, how it shifted from toxic masculinity to professional excellence, how different branches learned to cooperate instead of compete, how the military became better at its mission by becoming better to its people. They'll cite studies, statistics, official reports. but those who were there will know the truth. It started in a mess hall in Camp Pendleton, with a woman who refused to be defined by others' limitations, with Marines who chose transformation over comfort, with one simple lesson that changed everything. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And when it does, the whole world shifts.